Pocket.
Good catch.
Yep, there we go. And I'm going to use my teacher voice too, which I feel very lucky to have. Thank you guys for having me here. And I'm going to let you know that in a few minutes you're going to have to talk to each other. Because I loved that we started with that language of hope. And I understand I'm here because we are united against a common enemy right now. And I want us to be for something. I want us to be in community with each other. I want you to see someone at Heinen's and be like, weren't you at the Indivisible meeting? Or someone wearing one of those awesome pins and be able to say, oh, I love your pins. And even more importantly, I think we've built momentum because we've smiled and connected with folks who weren't wearing a pin or who we haven't seen in Indivisible meetings. We have to be in community right now. It's so important. It's what drove me as a classroom teacher. It's what's driven my work in Shaker. And I want to make sure it happens for us tonight. So that's why I brought Rice Krispie treats and cool pins to add to your collection and bookmarks and identifiers. But I also think that we can really do hard things. Okay, so Honesty for Ohio Education is a coalition of about 80 organizations across Ohio and about 5,000 individual members now. So I'm like, we should be raising $5,000 to support food insecurity right now too. I love that idea, love it. And I'm gonna go give my dollar or more, I promise. We started because in spring of 2021, the Ohio legislature, extremist politicians in the Ohio legislature filed bills that said we could not talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, about critical race theory, about queerness in our schools. And I was like, and I did my background knowledge on the Ohio State House was Schoolhouse Rock, right? I'm just a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. But I'm here to tell you from the other side, that's not how bills become laws. Bills become laws because politicians have power, and they use that power, and we have power, and we must step up and into using our power as well. But before we do, let's get in community. Whether or not you attended public school, or you nurtured a kid who attended public school, or you were a former educator or school leader or instructional coach or a sports coach or a taxpayer or a community member or a volunteer, I hope you've had a positive experience with the public school system. So I want you to turn to someone you don't know and see, if you two are sitting next to each other, you're gonna go this way and you go behind you, right? I want you to turn to someone you don't know and tell them that story. You each have 1 minute to go, okay? Introduce yourself and tell your story, okay? Talk is what connects us to each other. I want you to air high five your partner. I want you to elbow bump them if they're close enough to elbow bump them. I want you to take 3 fingers, kiss them, and blow them a kiss, right? When we take the chance to share our stories with each other, that's how we build community. And this was a story of joy, but we also have to share our stories of frustration or pain or disappointment as well. But I really want us, at least for this hour we have together tonight, to come from this place of energy and momentum and care for each other and for the work of protecting public education. And I'm a little bit bummed because I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so giving you like 16 terrible updates, okay? So bear with me. There'll be a couple slides of positivity, and I also have this slide in the presentation, so I'll come back to this at the very end. If you're a QR code person, or if you want me to email this to you, you can just come and give me your name on a Post-it note and I'll send it to you. But through the presentation, there'll be questions you ask or things I forgot, and I will drop them all into slide 3 so that you can find them. So for instance, I forgot to put my name up there, my phone number, and my email address. You might, who's from Colorado? I mean, you might want me to come out there and do this presentation, right? I mean, you never know.
Bring your sheets.
Exactly. Or to your faith organization, or to your workplace, or somewhere else. I want you to be able to connect with me again. So this is where I'll drop all of those things. I also must shout out honesty for Ohio education. We send a regular email, we post on media, we make buttons and stickers and handouts, and all of that stuff is in the back of the room. We have stepped into, in the past 3 months, into creating more and more toolkits. So taking complex information and whittling it down to 8 or 12 pages of info, so that you don't ever think that a bill becomes a law from Schoolhouse Rock again. We have to dispel that myth. But we know that so many, if you're showing up at an Indivisible meeting, you're probably interested in the advanced beginners or even the intermediate level info. So the toolkits can help you dive into that. I love Honesty for Ohio Ed. I'm a volunteer, I don't work there, but I really carve out time to ensure that we've got accurate, timely, and actionable information that citizens in Ohio can use. Because our politicians have power, and we have power. And I want us using that power to support our public schools and their kids. So lots of things that you can do to stay involved with us. So I'm going to focus on 3 areas of government. You could probably pass this quiz. The federal level, I'm going to spend a little bit of time in that space. I think maybe 3 years ago, folks would be like, what's an executive order? And now we're all like, have you heard about the new executive order? We have new vocabulary and language and care about that. I'm going to talk about the state, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happening at the local level too, especially about our taxes and the ways we support our state and local communities can, in my opinion, should support our public schools. So, go to the red line. The federal budget process did not meet the deadline of September 30th. So we have a shutdown right now. And that is creating tremendous tension. In fact, not in this deck. And I actually thought about sort of pulling my laptop over and adding this. I don't know if anyone else heard the story this morning on NPR about Head Start closings happening because of, I know, gut punch, right? I was like, can I quit my job and see kids in our house, right? Like, we're feeding people, people are losing childcare. There are tremendous tensions happening steps from us right now. And when Head Start closes, it's not just lack of child care for the kids who rely on Head Start for diapers, healthy meals, safe rest, excellent play, lap time. Head Start is a very particular model. It's not just child care, it really is high quality child care. And then think of all the people who work at Head Start, much like the air traffic controllers who, we're relying on the kindness of strangers to keep us safe, right? We already don't pay early childhood providers enough. So I'm not going to get into that, but I do want to share where are we right now. So in the education part of the federal bills, the Senate and the House each have their versions, and the Senate version is the better version right now. And so if someone were to ask you, like, what's the holdup, or where should I have an opinion on this? The House bill, the House budget bill, really aligns with the agenda of dismantling systems. The Senate bill does a little bit less than that, and I really want to note that supporting Title I and IDEA, which supports learners with learning differences, is so important in our country. But no surprise, we're not really invested in supporting learners with learning differences. If you, again, I could be talking about the autism news, or, you know, everything is very interrelated. But I do want to highlight these two things that impact kids and families every day. And that's the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And look at this, premium increases up to 83% for the 1.4 million Ohioans. That includes me. I get my insurance off the market, right? And our increase is 37% so far next year, right? It's just me and my husband, already not going to the doctor as much as we should, and stepping into what we're looking at right now because of these, because of our tension over addressing the healthcare issue. And I think many of us understand what's happening with SNAP right now, and I appreciate what Indivisible is doing to step up and in. I'm going to add an additional idea as well. I feel like we are asking people who rely on SNAP to take extra steps in their life right now, to double check when the pantries are open and what the pantry schedule is and how to navigate that system. And it's a whole new system to navigate. So I encourage you, if you know folks who are in schools, to think about when you go grocery shopping and to pick up a couple $25 gift cards and give those to a principal, a social worker, your family and community engagement specialist. We have an excellent person in Shaker. I know Lisa Hunt in the Heights, and I'm sure other districts have them. And they know the families that need that support. Because if you are already working hard and trying to support your family, to then say midday, I love Forest Hill Church so much, it's where I go to church. We have an awesome relationship with the Cleveland Food Bank, and our pantry is on Tuesday afternoons. You know, we give 55 pounds of food to every family that comes. But if you haven't done that system, people start lining up about 90 minutes before our pantry opens. So you can't just sort of pop over at lunch, right? You have to learn a whole new system of how things are happening. So I really want us to trust the people who are facing schools or are facing a child care, or share them with a minister at your church, so that if you have the means to support someone else accessing food with dignity, and I'm certainly not saying that our food resources are not doing that with dignity, but think about other ways you can support folks on the down low in a way that provides folks who are closer to the problem with the resources they need to help families.
That is a great idea.
Yeah. So, and it's, you know, it means that you need to know someone in the schools, but if you don't know someone, let me know and I can tell you who the Heights person and the Shaker person are. I can take your gift cards for you. I can do whatever would help you out. So we are looking at 535,000 children relying on SNAP. And if you are in this space at all, if you are a hungry adult, it makes it harder to sleep, harder to parent well, harder to be alert at your job, harder to be kinder when you're driving on the road. And almost every adult who has kids is going to feed their kids first. It's going to cause trauma, body challenges, We should not be asking parents to drink water so that their kids can have a meal. So keep advocating in this space, right? This is not a space, I was not spending time in the Medicaid space, I was not spending time in the ACA space, I wasn't spending time in the IDEA space. But this is the work of government to provide these care and feeding for all of us, literally and figuratively. So it is all connected. So this government shutdown work is important. So now I'm going to bring us to Columbus. I know, boo, this is hard. I think you've probably noticed that I'm calling a cohort of legislators in Ohio extremist politicians. I've really stopped saying Democrats and Republicans because I believe, and honesty is working, with some Republicans who are fiscally conservative and more socially progressive, and by my lumping all Republicans as the enemy, I'm not creating space for Republicans who want to do the right thing by kids and families, schools in Ohio. So I, about 2 years ago, started talking about extremist politicians who are out of touch with what their constituents want and what Ohioans want. And it gives me a label to make it really clear who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about extremist politicians who use their power to harm and to push an agenda that comes from the federal agenda, or comes from conservative and extremist foundations or individuals who are funding their campaigns. And that is different from like the Republicans that we used to actually try and collaborate across the aisle with. We need to get those people standing. You told us today. We have to be calling the D's and the R's in DC and in Columbus and holding them accountable to get things done. So, the state budget, not a good deal. Extremist politicians, gave a bunch of money for the Browns stadium, right? And while they were doing that, in one hand, here's your bucket of money, they were taking money from public education. So our Fair School Funding Plan, which has been on the books in Ohio for decades now, was not funded again. So we saw the state contribution to schools from the budget. And in Ohio, we are required to pass our general assemblies are 2 years long. So the legislatures show up in January and they have 2 years, starting in the odd year, they have 2 years worth of legislation, they make a 2-year budget, that General Assembly lasts 2 years. So we are in November of year 1, and these are the dollars we're sitting with. Not enough money for libraries, expanding voucher programs, making it easier for ESAs, education spending accounts. Were vetoed, but we poured that money into voucher programs instead, which means that money is going directly to schools instead of being controlled by families. And here in Ohio, we don't have strong oversight over voucher receiving schools. Those schools get to operate from another set of rules. So it was and is distressing. This is our 2-year plan. So what Honesty has done is created a whole landing page around school funding. This is going to come up again when I talk about taxing. And what I really want to make sure is that you know that Policy Matters Ohio, PMO, has also done some work to combine, if your cut is X from the state and Y from the feds, where is your district right now? So that you can start sharing this information with colleagues, with friends, even just keeping it in your own back pocket as issues. I bet there are many folks in this room who are for our public schools and for public education, but we might have neighbors and colleagues who don't understand what's happening with the funding of public education in Ohio. Sometimes it can be really helpful just to say like, here's a one-pager on Berea. Here's a one-pager on Hudson. Here's a one-pager on Mentor, so that you can start to understand your own community. So, property taxes. I definitely want to pay less taxes, right? In theory. I'm for tax cuts, right? I'm 60, I'm trying to retire. I live in Shaker Heights. And when I now have grown to understand that when the state doesn't fund the public school system, so that money is decreasing, where do the dollars come from in order to ensure libraries, schools, police, our developmental disabilities boards, our county services are supported? You know, where does it come from then? We've moved to a flat tax in Ohio, right? So if you're making, I believe the number is $140,000 for a family of 4, you'll pay less taxes. And so this tension that I'm like, I want good services, right? And I get that as someone who has a job, I should pay my taxes to make those things happen. So this sort of tension around, wait, don't we want lower taxes? Isn't that good for people? What do we do then? Leads us to this the promise that extremist politicians made at the federal and the state level, I'll cut your taxes for you. And people are like, sign me up, more money for eggs and milk, right? That's what we know that people voted on. And the reality is that those prices of eggs and milk are going up. So there's a whole group of folks who are like, I do want my taxes cut. Are you kidding me? I couldn't buy eggs and milk before, and now I really can't buy eggs and milk. And what the state of Ohio has proposed is a terrible plan that puts schools and services like libraries, policing. I heard on a call this morning that Republicans are worried because progressives were saying, defund the police. And that's exactly what some of these tax bills will do. They will defund the police. And so in Ohio, we're in this awkward, tense, multifaceted space where we have 4 bills right now in Ohio that are moving in committee in Columbus right now that are going to change how we pay taxes. And because our state is gerrymandered, they're likely going to pass. And every one of our communities will have to start to figure out, well then what does that mean for local taxes? Even as we just yesterday in Shaker passed a school levy. So we're passing a school levy to keep even, and the state is going to decrease, so now we still have a gap. And then you take that federal gap in funding, and the gap continues to widen. It doesn't feel good. And I want to say something that I'm learning to say with more strength. That was the plan, to undercut our faith in public institutions like schools. And to be like, well, if the public school system is falling apart, maybe I should be using a voucher to go to school A, B, or C. So this was not just in Project 2025, which is the blueprint for what the Trump administration is doing at the federal level and encouraging folks to do, encouraging extremist leaders to do at the state level. But it's been a long-term plan Didn't just start in 2025, didn't start in 2017. It's a long-term plan to make us feel like our public institutions are not doing what they should. You can't count on them. And so at Honesty, we see these levies needed on the right-hand side. So I love how this graphic, because it reminds us that everyday people may pay less, but you know who's really going to pay less? Rich people and corporations, because there are so many loopholes for them. And then we are going to need to pay more to ensure that we have parks and policing and public education. And so Honesty, along with amazing partners, the League of Women Voters, Policy Matters Ohio, the Ohio Ed Policy Institute, we're sharing this information in accurate, timely, and actionable bites in our newsletter. And in fact, in case anyone asks me questions about this, we have a call every Wednesday. Today's notes were 36 pages of notes about the bills and what's happening with especially these taxing bills. So our newsletter is the best way to get this info. Okay. So, the state is not paying its fair share. That's the bottom line. And they're going to ask us to do that they're not going to ask us to do it at the local level. They're going to say, we don't care what you do at the local level. We've committed our promise. We've said we're going to cut taxes, and we have. So, here are the takeaways. There's been tremendous instability because of cuts and waves of crisis at the federal level. Property taxes are taking away public services, and public schools are a part of that. And Ohio, which, as a reminder, 90% of kids in Ohio go to public schools. You all probably know someone who goes to Ignatius or Beaumont or Hawken or a charter school. But the truth of the matter is, in Ohio, 90% of our kids, the kids that are scooping your ice cream at Mitchell's, bagging your groceries at the Giant Eagle, babysitting your kid, living next door to you, are going to public schools. They're our investment. We should all need to be invested in what happens in that space. It's our generational promise to kids. And our schools are not perfect, but they are the place where 90% of our kids are getting their education. So we all need to step in and be invested in what happens there and how we fund them and the good things that happen. So Honesty is tracking this and sharing this information, Wednesday newsletters, the legislation tracker, or just honestyforohioeducation.org, and you can get to the tracker. It's nice and big at the top of our page. Okay, so I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. When we were started, we were like, libraries, schmiberries. We don't have time to tend to what's happening in libraries. And yet you see the synergy between libraries and public education in two places. One, because we rely on similar processes from the state to be funded. And secondly, the state is sticking its nose into the work of librarians, deciding what books they can give kids access to. The same way they're sticking their nose into curriculum, they're sticking their nose into libraries. And so we see this limiting action happening at libraries as an opportunity for partnership instead of siloing. So Honesty has a library work group. We fought hand in hand with libraries around these freedom to read rights. Right? If you don't want your kid to read a book about growing up queer, then you should talk with your kid about not taking that book out of the library, but that doesn't mean your kid can't read that book, right? Absolutely, right? So we're doing work in libraries. We are doing work fighting for diversity, equity, and inclusion being a priority for the work that we do in our state. And right now, this middle part is definitely some of the most bummer news that I have. Senate Bill 1, SB 1, ended diversity, equity, and inclusion programming and supports in public colleges and universities in Ohio. That bill was called Senate Bill 1 because it was the first bill in January 2025 filed by Jerry Serino, who might be some of your senators, right? He's, 20 minutes from here.
Yeah, mine.
I'm sorry for your...
His daughter is on our
Yes,
school
just school, exactly. So from a political family. Despite thousands of students and activists saying this is not what Ohio wants, you'll have Dan Moulthrop here in 2 meetings. Many of us stood outside the City Club with signs telling Serino this is not what Ohio wants. Students marched down from Cleveland State that day. This bill was quickly signed by our legislature, passed through committee, had floor votes, was signed by the governor. In fact, the governor didn't have to sign it. If he'd let it go, the way Ohio works, if it's passed by the House and the Senate, in 10 days it becomes a law. But Governor DeWine actually made a big deal out of signing it with people around him and his pen. Really disappointing.
A week before Teacher Appreciation.
Yeah. So that was a big loss in the opening months of that General Assembly. And you know who the loss impacts? Kids in Ohio who say, I don't want to go to college in Ohio if LGBTQ kids aren't safe, if I can't take a class that includes studying diversity, if we aren't going to have a frame of inclusion for veterans or single moms or second language learners or first-gen college students. So my prediction is that we're going to experience a brain drain in Ohio. This generation who pulled, I was, on my Instagram, and a friend posted that like 78% of the push that brought in these Democrats and Democratic Socialists into winning these elections yesterday were young people. And do we really want all of our young people leaving Ohio? We're working so hard to make their K-12 education. So in honesty, we're also thinking about higher ed, and we're distressed that SB 1 passed. It's bad news. And so if you know young people, if you know college counselors, if you are spending time with friends that are professors, be sure to check in on them and say, what do you need? What can I do? What are you hearing? We also have 2 bills that would end DEI at the K-12 level in Ohio. These are variations on the bills that had us found, that convinced me that we needed an organization like Honesty for Ohio Ed. SB 113 and HB 155 are partner bills. They say the exact same thing. One is moving in the Senate and one is moving in the House. The good news is that these bills are not moving right now. The bad news is they're not moving right now because the legislature in Ohio has said that their priority is passing a tax bill before Thanksgiving. So they don't have time to ban higher K-12 DEI, right? They're getting their priorities straight or unstraight. Honesty has created a toolkit to help people understand these bills and why advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools and our community matters. That toolkit is in the toolkit section of our website. There's a handout that I forgot was in my bag, but all of our toolkits and QR codes by the Rice Krispie treats. And we do have now HB 327. Irony that HB 327 was a bad bill in the 134th General Assembly, but it's a good bill. It's a parent's right to inclusion, diversity, and equity. What are we for, right? So I said earlier, there's so much that we're against right now. I'm really grateful to legislators who put a bill that says what we are for. I don't think we'll see HB 327 move, but it's important that things are out there that we can stand with instead of stand against. Religion in school. These are some of the most complex bills happening. I do want to name that you can see the numbers growing, that we're up to the Charlie Kirk American Heritage Act was filed in Ohio just a few days after Charlie Kirk was murdered. And Honesty is working hard to ensure that bills that ask us to celebrate hate and harm, to me this is sort of like the January 6th Remembrance Act, like that it's really bad things happen and we don't want to celebrate those bad things happening in Ohio. And many of these, the Given Name Act is harmful for queer kids, for trans kids. Going back to prayer in school with a moment of silence and historical documents requiring the 10 Commandments to be hanging up in classrooms. These are tricky days, and we have a toolkit to help understand these bills as well. I'm tiring myself out, okay. Immigrant students, we have, I spend a lot of time in Chicago, and Chicago has been fighting back, and this morning, a preschool teacher was pulled out of her preschool in front of her parents and her students at school drop-off this morning. So I'm just really feeling triggered by how horrible the destruction of ICE is to communities, to safety, to kids. And I'm so grateful for what I heard. I was not aware of this idea that businesses can create a space that obviously they have to create it before ICE knocks on the door. And if you know Forest Hill Church, we've been a sanctuary church, right? So this idea of sanctuary, where hospitals and churches and schools have been sanctuary and are no longer sanctuary spaces in our community anymore. I'm sure, and if you guys haven't had me come to one of the meetings, you know, there are so many good people doing this work, and yet we still have, I'm particularly worried about HB 42, which would require not just schools, but prisons to report the immigration status of everyone who they interact with. It just, I can look and see who the sponsor is. I mean, it's just really, that is not about community care, right? Probably Andrew Brenner, but I'll look it up for you so that you know. So this is just really horrible stuff. And we work with school board folks in order to ensure that organizations like the Ohio Superintendents Association, the Ohio School Board Association, is fighting against these in unison with us and with immigration rights forums. I told you the list was long. I'm actually going to, this bill was just filed and it really just got introduced. It is 500 pages of changes to the code that guides how public schools are run in Ohio. And I'm going to just share that I personally am such in an untrusting space that I can't believe that this is something that's for the good, right? I don't think this is someone checking on the redundancies and making sure that we name all the sports that we need locker rooms for, whatever it might be. I'm very, very worried about a lot of the things in this large bill. It reminds me, we call it the new big bill, right? And that lack of trust. So I see something that says, we are going to eliminate the American history and American government end of course exams. And then at the same time, Ohio would like to allow us to give an exam that has been created by the Heritage Foundation that they're now piloting in Michigan schools that would be like, and I'm sure you've heard that Oklahoma teachers now have to take an anti-woke exam to prove that they're not woke. So I don't have trust that this isn't going to be coupled with harm. Okay. Some positives. See, I told you there'd be some good stuff showing up. So, legislators, and sometimes across the aisle, legislators are working together on things. Compassionate conservatives, right? Finding their path, working across the aisle. We do have a couple bills that are focused on ensuring, this was way before the SNAP SNAP crisis due to the shutdown, but more access to dollars to feed kids in colleges and in the K-12 space. I do want to say about HB 157, which I think is an excellent bill, that many kids that experience food insecurity in college were able to get support for that through programs that were like, oh, you're a veteran, oh, you're a first-gen student. So we've cut those programs out, and then it's like, oh my gosh, how are the hungry veterans that are going back to college getting food? We need to create programming for that, right? So they're not even they didn't even think about the harm that a bill like SB 1 would cause and the repercussions that that would have. Ensuring that kids that are in foster care have access to designated dollars. Again, that would be inclusion, right? And so we're making amends, the Crown Act, that would ensure that any people with natural hair, especially Black women who experience discrimination in the workplace, would, and I believe that the Crown Act right now only applies to people who work in schools. So thinking about how that gets expanded to other places and you can't be discriminated against because of your hair. And then addressing teacher shortages, right? So some positives. Woohoo! Barely fills a slide, right? But I want to go back to that reason why you're here, the positives, the reasons why you believe in and care for our schools, and I want you to find your partner again, and I want you to share with them an action that you can take. What's something you want to learn more about, or what's something you want to do to get involved? What's an organization that you might support? You're like, gosh, my church is doing stuff with refugees, or I am going to go to Heinen's and or Dave's and get gift cards. I want us to take some of this and move towards action. So find your partner, you each just have 1 minute, and then we're going to move to Q&A. I will, and then make an action statement. I will.
You're shaking your head.
So I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I also want to say that one of my, and I'm really sorry to announce this like this, but Josh Williams from Toledo is one of my least favorite legislators in Ohio right now, and he's the sponsor of HB 42 for immigration status being reported by anyone who interacts with the police.
Someone needs to study. Someone needs to do their PhD thesis on what is going on with that man internally.
Yeah, he is a victim of, but he is empowered right now, and he was at the SB 1 signing.
Oh yeah.
If you want toolkits, or you want to learn more about honesty, if you want to let people know that you vote for education, that you believe queer kids matter, that you believe in teaching the honest and complete teaching of history, that we should read all stories.
Absolutely.
And then you want to know more about toolkits or accurate, timely, and actionable information. I hope you'll learn more about honesty. We do rely on donations, but I really want to encourage us to share our dollars and time and energy with people who are hungry right now as a priority. And let's do Q&A.
I am going to come around the microphone because the acoustics in here are not always the best, so I will hold the microphone while you speak. So who's the first question?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a place called the COVID Bates House.
Yes.
It's on Mayfield Road, and it was part of the Underground Railroad. They were very active, and they connected with the Oberlin people that actually took people to Canada. I mean, it's really, it's open only on Saturday mornings or something. It's really something to see.
What's the name again?
COVID Bates House.
That's at
Kozak
University
Bates
Circle,
House,
yeah.
yes. I will put the link on slide 3, and let me make a connection. That is the exact kind of thing that kids should be able to go on field trips on. They should study the role of Ohio as part of the Underground Railroad. There's actually an awesome app that you can download that tells Ohio's story from Cincinnati to Lake Erie. And to silence those stories hurts all kids. It hurts black kids, white kids, immigrant kids, straight kids, queer kids, young kids, old kids. It doesn't just hurt black kids who won't understand the Underground Railroad or white kids. It hurts every kid when we do not tell the stories, whether those are celebration stories or harm stories. And so that's why us spending time in those spaces matters, supporting educators spending those time in those spaces matter, and why advocating for the honest and complete teaching of history matters.
And if anyone's interested, I happened to go last summer. They actually had 2 tours that I went on, my wife and I went on, so I can tell you the name of the app. I actually wrote a blog post about this organization.
That's awesome.
It went away, but it's the name of the app is the Ohio Freedom Path. It basically follows the Ohio to Erie Canal, and it overlap. But there's an actual app that's supposed to be to give you a tour as you travel through Ohio.
It's awesome.
Some houses that connected.
Probably talking about police government at the end here.
Yeah.
So, there's an emergency meeting on school funding Tuesday night at Fairfax Elementary School that the Ohio Organizing Collaborative is called. Our superintendent will be there, our school board president, and other school board members, a number of people. It's from 6 to 7:30 at Fairfax Elementary.
For Heights.
For Cleveland.
Yeah, for people who are Cleveland Heights or University Heights folks. Yeah, I know people are from all over, yes. OOC Superintendent Kirby, who was here at the last meeting, she and I were lucky enough to teach together in Chicago. Dan Hines was just reelected to your board. He's the current president, Merle?
I don't know if he's president.
No.
Yeah, but you have Cleveland Heights, University Heights has a very active community and has much to lose. Their fact sheet is very distressing when you go and look at the Policy Matters Ohio fact sheets. So the link to that is in similar to what you all have in having a Talkify. We have an events page on the Honesty page, so you can find out about local things happening in your community as well through Honesty teams.
So I just wanted to make a suggestion for people to think about, that one of the things we can contribute on a national level is to re-elect shared ground. And I think one of the things that would be very helpful, we could start now, if we could be creative about exposing Husted's votes and what he stands for and his record. And get creative about it, because a lot of people really don't know, and no one can meet with him. You know, he makes himself totally scarce. So whether it be raising funds for radio ads or billboards or those signs on over the expressway folks, you know, I hope we think about that. That's a contribution we can make. And I believe there's somebody in Columbus Indivisible that is looking at the billboard as an option, because this is a state.
Yeah, I also there is also a website called Truth on Vivek, which exposes Vivek Ramaswamy's, who's running for governor against Amy Acton's, anti-public education stances, where he is on the record. So this is very much focused on his education stances, We need to feel that energy of that riding what's happened in, I was looking for you here, in Virginia, in PA, and if I can, and I am for good trouble, I'm also very much for that neighbor-to-neighbor conversation that brings people in as well. I think that kind of organizing where the quiet new person or the person you haven't talked to at church or the parent that you talk to at pickup, we need to be calling those folks in to envision a better Ohio, as well as calling out what Vivek, what Husted stands for as well. It's and thinking about the actions we can take.
Oh, sorry. First, I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done, that you're doing. I mean, if anyone is not familiar with the toolkits by now, I mean, they are legendary in my opinion.
Very nice.
They are just so incredibly well done and thorough and just such a great resource. So thank you for that. I guess my question is, what I don't understand is, what is the end game of the extremist legislators that want to destroy public education? Because I feel like the explanations of just, well, they want to be able to turn it into a private industry, how do they directly benefit from that? Like, what has allowed them to organize so well?
I'm going to give you my 1 minute answer.
Okay.
There was an amazing presentation at the City Club 2 years ago, and I will put it on page 3 for you, by an awesome journalist, researcher, Steve, and I'm spacing out his last name. He grew up in Cleveland. He actually went to Hawken, and his book is around white supremacy and the fear of a multiracial democracy.
Don't educate black kids, it's very good.
Yes. That idea that America in 2040 is becoming a multiracial democracy has created momentum for white supremacy through white Christian nationalism, through the defunding of the public education system, by hurt and harm of removing health care, which leads to stress and de-stress. So, with all the love and care, we cannot talk about what's happening and not talk about white supremacy. White folks, we need to call each other in to understanding white supremacy and its impact. I truly believe that although there is anti-immigrant statements and wealth to be had, that much of what is happening is grounded in the loss of power to white, male, Christian humans of wealth who speak English and work in business, and that hoarding of power and understanding that if we can let go of some of the tenets of white supremacy and embrace collectivism, abundance, community care, if we can unlearn, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Why, I know a person who was able to do X, Y, Z. If we can unlearn that generational, as Resma Menachem calls it, that white folks have generational harm from the tenets of white supremacy, as well as black bodies being harmed by that. And if we can give ourselves the space to believe in abundance, that is what happened in New York City, that there was room for everyone, right? And so that the loss of power and the lure of holding on to that power, even though America is changing, and seeing that change for a multiracial democracy, for all of the joy and abundance and care and community that comes with that. We have some serious unlearning to do because 2040 is around the corner. That's why Project 2025 was not written in 2024 to be ready. Project 2025 was drafted in the early 2000s as soon as the Heritage Foundation figured out by 2040 this country, that white people would not be the majority in America anymore. And there's a great New York article, I'll put it in the link as well, and on page 3 as well. So this is why we need the honest and complete teaching of history in our schools, because we have to understand from where this comes. It's about power, harm, hoarding, and fear. And that's why it's big actions and neighborly actions, that those things have to go hand in hand. You cannot shame people into caring about others.
I would recommend White Poverty by Dr. Reverend William Barber. I just finished reading that, and it gives us the language to use when we are explaining that. Because one of the things that he talks about is the fact that when, that whole, say when you talk about poverty, automatically we've been so conditioned to think about black folk. And so therefore, but we don't want them to, those entitlements. We don't talk about white poverty. So therefore we talk about working class people or underpaid. And I just think that it's an excellent book because once again, we need to have the language to talk to each other about that. It's called White Poverty, and it's Dr. William Barber.
Yep, Reverend Dr. William Barber, who was also just at the City Club, and I will put the link to that there. And if you know anything about the City Club, and you're going to be here in 2 weeks, I'm trying to be here then too, you should ask Dan, because Merle knows, she's a regular. When that hour hits, that bell rings, but not for Dr. Reverend William Barber. That session was 2 hours long. Beautiful. Of faith, of energy, of calling in, of truth telling, of action items. And so thank you for reminding us of his. Steve Phillips, that's who wrote the book that I can remember.
And he preaches like Dr. King.
He does.
To me.
He does. And he does some really important storytelling in that session. So these are two Steve Phillips and William Barber, 2 black men inviting us to be a part of solutions, a vision of abundance, a vision of care. And I hope that, maybe we need a book club. Yeah.
I've got one thing to mention. I'm on Chris Quinn's morning text message, and he always talks about what his editorial is going to be about. Excuse me. One of the things that he's been pondering about is how does Cleveland have an average house price of $200,000, and yet our young people are fleeing Cleveland and basically fleeing Ohio. And what the heck, while all these millennials are moving to areas that are very high, expensive homes, and he's looking at just kind of one way as our housing stock. And he's like, what's going on? So tonight I sat down with my husband and we came up with there was about 8 or 9 different issues that go back to Ohio politics. Starting with HB1, women's right to not have their own health care when it comes to pregnancy. We got started and we kept rolling. So I am going to encourage everybody here to answer Chris Quinn's question. Write to the editor of Cleveland Plain Dealer, the editor of Cleveland.com, and let him know why our children are leaving Ohio. My daughter has left, and she vows she will never come back and live in Ohio. And I can't blame her one bit. So please share that.
And I will link some of our, I never knew the phrase LTE before being involved in honesty, but letters to the editor. We have a couple templates, because the truth is, you can write that letter to the editor and you can send it to cleveland.com, but you can also send it to your town paper, you can post it on your own social media, you can print it out, put it in an envelope and mail it to 20 friends and say, I want to let you know that I'm using my voice for power. Take a look, let's have coffee and chat about it, or ask me about it, right? Like, just because it doesn't get published doesn't mean you can't use your voice for power. Power, power, power. So I'll make sure the templates are on here too.
Do you have any more questions for Lisa tonight? I am so thrilled that you have come tonight.